good afternoon. If you are receiving this video, then you are probably in Social Work 201-01. That is diversity and ethnicity. This is going to be an online class for this semester. We have some interesting things that you will be doing. There's a lot of written work, just so you know that up front. Let's go ahead and let's get the syllabus up and we'll take a look at that together and then we'll go from there. So our syllabus. When we go through it, my email is there, my cell phone is there. If you want to text me because you have a question, or if you want to email me, you can do either one of those. This is considered a 3-hour online course. That's why there's so much writing. If you are up on campus, there are times that I am going to be there, no problem. Stop in and see me, make an appointment to come see me. My door will be open to you. I do have some classes at different times. So if you want to see me, just let me know, okay? So the course description focuses on ethnic and cultural diversity. We want to increase your awareness. There are a lot of things that go on in our world that, because of prejudices, because of color, because of nationality, because of culture. So we're going to learn a little bit of that and learn about the different cultures. Okay. We're going to examine attitudes and values and descriptions of stereotypes. So we'll be learning some good things as well as the not so good things that go along with it. You do have a book for this class. You will be expected to read. This is the book. I have the name of the book there, Racial and Ethnic Groups. It is by Richard Schaefer. I might have you look at some different things. There will be some videos that we'll go through. So a lot of this also are things that we have for everything. Now, this is a social work class, even though it is a general class that everybody has to take. It goes with competency 3, which is engage anti-racism, diversity, equality, and inclusion. That is something that social workers are supposed to do. They're supposed to understand that white supremacy and privilege are not good things, okay? So I'm not going to insult your intelligence. I'm going to have you read through that on your own. We'll have readings. There'll be news and media, written opinions. Who am I? And so we have all of that listed. General education outcomes, student outcomes, attendance, absences, and participation. If you do not get a paper in on time, you will usually have a week of an open window. If you don't get things in within that amount of time, that window will close. I will not reopen it. If we have a quiz, you will have a specific time that you need to take that quiz. If you do not take that quiz, then you, if it closes on you, I'm not going to reopen it. I can't reopen it. I've got too many other things to do. So make sure you know when assignments are due and when windows close, okay? Usually I have things closed in the AM. Don't mistake it for a PM. It is closed in the AM. So if I do not have an accommodation letter on you, then I'm not going to be very lax on you, okay? Counseling center, inclement weather is not going to affect you. We're online. So unless we have a major storm where everybody's power is knocked out and their capabilities of getting onto a computer for a week is created, then then there's a problem. But other than that, that would be the only thing. Class will not be canceled for this due to inclement weather. Okay. Don't plagiarize. I prefer that you don't use the AI tools. You can use spell check, and I prefer that you use spell check, but write your own paperwork. Okay. I want to know what you think. Most of the writing is opinions, thoughts, what you think about things. All right. I try to give you time for different holidays. So we get into the categories. We have the introduction essay, Who Am I? It's 10 points. Opinion papers are 10 points each. News and media reviews are 10 points, or let's see, they're worth 100 points. There are 10 of them, which is 10 points each. We have 4 quizzes, and we have a term paper and presentation, an essay on self and cultural awareness, and racism in the movies. Okay. I may give you a 4th one, but at this point, we only have 3. Just depends on if you have a problem, if your grade is not going well, if it is not where you want it to be, please notify me immediately. Don't wait until the semester is over and say, hey, can I do extra work? Okay. Be on top of it. I teach at a couple of different colleges, and I had a student that waited till the end of the semester. He had missed a couple quizzes. He missed, he wanted an A, he got a B, and he waited till after everything was over and came to me and said, can I do some additional work? And I said no, but he went to the dean of the department. The dean of the department came back to me and said, hey, could you do this? And I had to do it. I don't like to do that. I don't feel it's fair to the other students. Don't put me in that position, okay? We have 400 is the total points, A, B, C, D, E, and F. And you really, really have to work at it to fail the class, okay? So, written assignments, use Microsoft Word. Do not use anything else but Microsoft Word. Put it into Sakai. Do not email it to me. If you email it to me because it's after the time, then you're going to get a 0, okay? Everything is submitted through Sakai. Make sure that you include your name on the course and which course it is, because in some cases, I have multiple courses. This doesn't happen to be one of them, but just to get into that, into that habit, okay? So there will be one big paper, and I will assign you a group. It may be Mexican, Irish, Arab, Egyptian. I will give you a group, and that will probably go out to you within the next couple weeks. Yeah, I will email it to you. You will research that group, everything that you can. It is going to be your major paper, okay? And then you're going to do a video and submit it through Sakai, all right? It will be a 2-minute and 50-second video where you will be presenting what your findings were. Doesn't have to be long, but for 2.5 minutes, 3 minutes, it has to be very succinct. You have to have all of your ducks in a row, all of your facts, okay? I did this with my class last semester. I had some people that worked in partners, because we started out in person, and then because of some issues that I had to go to online. So we had to change it up. Students did an amazing job. They did things that I didn't think that they would do. I mean, so if there would be, I don't know whether any of you work together, but if there are, and you would come to me and say, hey, can the 2 of us work together? Yes. Total 5-minute presentation between the two people. Okay. Share what you're doing. All right. So, news and media in review. Every week, you will have a paper that you're going to write. I want you to go and look at things that are trending in social media. It can be the news, it can be a paper, it can be something that you found in a current journal, it can be on TikTok, it could be just anything like that. Take it and look at it critically. Think about it. Do you agree with the opinion of the person? Do you not agree? Give me a little bit of an idea of what they're talking about, and then what your thoughts are on it. This is just an opinion. There's no right or wrong answer. Okay. I want you to write it. It does not have to be in an APA style writing. Okay. I do ask that you maybe double space it, and it only has to be 1 page. Okay. So, you get your facts very, very quickly, put them together. Okay. Don't spout what the book says about something. Tell me what you think about it. We have the quizzes. So your very first paper is going to be due on 9/6. It is, who am I? Okay, so I want you to write maybe 2-3 pages about who you are. What's the family that you come from? What kind of cultural events or family things do you do? Is it based on a religious? Is it based on a cultural aspect? How do you celebrate? There are some groups that celebrate Christmas and there are groups that don't celebrate Christmas. Where did your family come from? What is their country of origin? How long have they been here? Now, you also have to remember that Appalachia is also a culture. Appalachian culture is very prominent in our area, especially. But you may come from a culture from an Indian reservation or from someplace like New York. Big city attitudes are very different than small town or rural areas. So just talk about who you are. That shouldn't be difficult. What do you like? What do you don't like? What kind of family did you grow up in? Some of us families look very different. Some of us have 2 parents, male and female. Some of us have 2 moms, 2 dads. Some of us are raised by our grandparents or another family member. Share that. And it will only be shared with me. I'm not going to spread it around and tell everybody your business in the class. I don't do that. But just tell me about how you grew up. What are your biases? Okay. Hopefully you get the gist of that. If you don't, send me an email and I'll try to explain it a little bit more. Okay. And that will be due on 9/6. So you have 2 weeks to be able to do that. We'll have videos that I will send you the links for them. I took the links out because they were no longer good links. So I will send you the updated links. You'll have a week to look at those and to watch the video. And then there will be an opinion paper. The first one will be white privilege. In that white privilege paper, what did you think? Do you agree? Do you not agree? Just a little bit of discussion about it, okay? Class divided. We'll have a video on that. One of the fun papers that you'll get to do is racism in movies. And it's a movie of your choice. It can be a comedy, it can be a drama, it can be a mystery, but look at it critically and look at where racism comes in. It may be racism towards the Arab community. It could be racism towards the indigenous people of the country. It could be Black people. It could be, there are a lot of movies out there that are comedies as well as dramas that have racism that are underlying currents. They may not even be hitting you in the face. It may not be overly obvious, but look at it critically, okay? You'll give a synopsis of what the movie is about, and then you can, what your opinion is. Do you agree, disagree, whatever, okay? We'll have those news and reviews. You will have quizzes. Your first quiz will be 9:20, okay? Have a total of 4 quizzes. And the video presentation, your paper, your 8-page paper with your video presentation done APA style format, 12 point. You'll have a cover page, and then you will have a cited page where you'll use your cites, whatever books, journals, information, where your information came from, and that will be an 8-page paper, excluding the cover page and the cite page, okay, or your resource page. All right. That as well as the video are due on 11/18. Okay, that will be the week before Thanksgiving. Please do not be late, because those two go together. You will not, if you do not do both, you will not get full credit. Okay, they are equal. So don't wait till the last minute. Make sure that you have that all put together. Myself, what I do is I use Zoom, and I put it on YouTube so that you all can see it. I'm sure you can do a YouTube and then post it to Sakai. I know that you can do that because my students did it before. Okay, so continuing on, there will be a final. We have pretty important some pretty important terms, okay, as we go down through. Take a look through those. Be professional in all that you do. Some of this is talks about in person, and it's not going to apply to you, but this can be used for either or, okay? Plagiarism, don't do it. If you use somebody else's words, make sure that you cite it in your paper, okay? That's very important. So that is our syllabus. So if you have any questions on that, you are welcome to send me an email about it in regard to it, and then we can go from there, okay? So let's go ahead and go through the first chapter. It's not very long. I'm going to assume that you are reading, okay? And chapter 1 is about exploring race and ethnicity, and that is the cover of the book, okay? So the learning objectives: explain how people are placed in groups, explain the social construction of race, describe how sociology helps us understand race and ethnicity, explain how subordinate groups are created, summarize the consequences of subordinate group status, describe how resistance and change occur in racial and ethnic relations, and define and describe intersectionality, okay? Those are all the things that you should be able to do. This gentleman right here, Hamdi Ulukaya, he is a self-made businessman. He came to the United States. He was Muslim. He started he started a small business. His family had made feta in the old country. And so he decided that he would start to make feta from the old recipes of his family, and he started to make money. Well, then he took out a small business loan, and with that small business loan, what he did was he bought a storefront that wasn't being used. It was a closed business. He bought that business and he opened up a yogurt shop. And he created this huge business called Chobani. And if you go to any grocery store locally, you will see Chobani yogurt. And this is the man behind it. Well, because he is an immigrant, he felt that he needed to put his money where his mouth was. He is worth $2 billion. His business brings in about 1.2 billion a year. Okay, has 2,000 employees, has really been successful, and he takes his money and tries to help resettle immigrants that have come to the United States from the Muslim community. He gives them jobs. He has folks that will teach them English. He has translators that speak 11 different languages that work for him, that if people need a translator, he can supply that. So he has been in that position, coming to a new country and struggling, and now he is helping other people who are coming to the United States to fulfill their American dream just as he has. So the racial and ethnic groups in the United States as of 2015 are as follows, and this is done by thousands. Predominantly white, non-Hispanic, and they don't add the Arab American population into the white group either. Okay, so there's a indication of the folks that are in our country, what the majorities are. And you may look at those and think, well, those aren't very big numbers. When you start to think about in the thousands above that, it's a pretty significant total. 58.7% of the population are white. You may ask, where do they get this information? Well, every year we have, or every 10 years, we have a census, right? So a lot of these numbers come from the last census. So we look at the ancestry. For the white ancestry, we have German and Irish, English, Italian, Polish, Scottish or Scots-Irish, French, Jews. And then we have the Hispanics, the Mexican Americans, the Puerto Ricans, the Salvadorians, the Cubans, the Dominicans, the Guatemalans, Colombians, and other Hispanic groups. So how were we grouped? Well, we are grouped by majorities and minorities. And just because somebody is a minority, they may actually be a majority. And I'll get more into that as we go along. So a minority group is considered a subordinate group. The members have less power and less control over things that go on in their lives. We have sociology. The minority means the same as subordinate. The dominant is the same as the majority. The dominant group is usually the majority group. The numbers usually have it. They're the ones that kind of tell you what to do, at least in some of our lives. Now, as we go through this, we'll start to look at places that were down in the South during the 1920s. The majority of the people in the South, in places like Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, were Black, but they had no power in the 1920s, even though they were the majority of people. But who were the ones who made the rules? Who was the dominant group? Of course, the white people. Majority and subordinate, or minority and subordinate group characteristics. These are the 5 characteristics. They're treated unequally. They're not as good as the dominant group. They're usually you can distinguish them from either their physical or their cultural traits. If you look at their skin coloring, if you look at their facial features, if you look at the way that they dress, they may be a little bit different than the majority of the people. And you can kind of tell that they are a different group, probably of a minority group. And being in a minority, you don't choose to be in a minority. It's considered an involuntary group. Nobody wants to be in a minority or a subordinate group because why? Because those are the groups that usually have prejudice against them. Awareness of subordination. We know if we are in a subordinate group, people tell us all the time that we are not as good as. Okay, it's very much like a caste system in places like China or India. You are told where your place is. Now, if we look at women, women are considered a subordinate group. Even though there are more women in this country than there are men, but women hold less power and control than what men do. Men hold the wealth as well as the power. And then in-group marriage. This used to be a really, really big thing. You didn't marry outside your race. There are some cultures that you still do not marry outside your race. There are things like arranged marriages. Even though people have come to the United States, they still send back home for a spouse for their child. Okay, they still have an arranged marriage. In the United States, in the 50s, if you were white, you could not marry a black person. That went all the way to the Supreme Court. It was called, it was the state of Virginia versus Loving. Mr. Loving was white. He married a black woman. It was illegal at that time. You could not marry outside your race. And both of them were sent to jail because of that. And finally, when it went to the Supreme Court, it was an opinion that you can marry whoever you want to marry, okay, as long as both individuals were in favor of it, okay. So that made a big change in things when it came to marriage. Now, 2 years ago, right after the overturning of Roe versus Wade, Supreme Court Justice, shoot, can't think of his name, Clements, I believe it is, who is a black man, brought up the idea, and he is married to a white woman, brought up the idea of marrying outside of race, which was to me a little bit odd because why would somebody, I'm sorry, it was Clarence Thomas. There we go. Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas. Why would anybody who was married to somebody who was from another race bring up that kind of a circumstance of possible overturn? Yeah, there we go. Okay, so there are types of minority groups. There are racial groups. Those are people with obvious physical differences. Now, we look at people who are Mexican or Chinese, and we can look at their eyes, their facial features, and even the color of their skin, and we know that they are different, right? So they fall into that minority category because they have physical differences than the other people in the country. Colorism. Now we look at people, there are various colors. There are very, very dark people. There are very, very light-skinned people. And that is among races. Even if you look at white people have various colors. Some are a very, very almost opaque white, and others have a darker skin, depending on what country of origin their family is. But sometimes people are looked down upon because of the color of their skin. We all know um, people who have been treated badly just because of their skin color. Um, it doesn't just happen in the United States. Even in places like Brazil, there are very, very dark skinned Brazilians and there are very light skinned Brazilians. And sometimes discrimination is because of their skin tone. So we're not the only ones that discriminate because of skin tone. Their ethnic groups, the national origin or distinctive cultural patterns. We have a tendency to put some ethnic groups into one category. Um, if we look at Hispanic or Latinos, who do we put into that? Well, Mexicans, Cubans, Spanish, um, uh, uh, Puerto Rican, Cuban, Colombian, all of those different countries. But their cultures are very different. They're not the same, but we lump them into one group as if they were the same. Even if we look at Europeans, Europeans are very different depending on what part of Europe you come from. Um, the customs are different. The cultures are very different. The foods are very different. The religious groups. There are different groups that are associated with different religions. And I believe Catholicism is still the highest ranking in the United States, but Protestantism is very close by. Then you have these smaller religions that are out there, places like the Mormons and the Jehovah's Witnesses and just different kinds of smaller sects. And there are discriminations because of the religious beliefs. I mean, we talk about Jewish people, we talk about Muslim people. Their religions are different from what many of us may agree with, but they're discriminated against because of their religion. If we go back to our beginnings of history for the United States, why did people come to the United States, or what was then considered the new country, the colonies? Why did people come to them? Because they were trying to escape religious persecution. So we look at those kinds of things and um, we will discriminate because of those minority groups. We have gender groups. Men are the social majority, even though women outnumber men. Women are relegated to a position of a social minority. There are other groups because of age or disability status or physical appearance or sexual identity. Biological meaning. There's an absence of pure races. Many people will look at another group and say, well, you know, our race is a pure race. If you look at some of these hate groups, that's their main argument is they aren't as good as we are because we are a pure race. There is no such thing as a pure race. Because of the movement of peoples for the last several thousands of years, there is no pure race. Racism is a doctrine of racial supremacy that sees one race as better than another. Race is a social construct. Race definitions called racial formation and socio-historical process by which racial categories are created, inhabited, transformed, and destroyed. So racial social construct can be changed. If we look throughout our history in the last 200 years, our socio-historical process has changed. It looks very different than what it looked like 2,000 years or 200 years ago. We have biracial and multiracial identity. And the problem is some people identify with one group over another group, even though they are a mixed race. We have panethnicity. The development of solidarity among related ethnic subgroups has emerged. If we go back in history, we can see where different groups who were very different culturally came to the United States, and they actually worked together for the betterment of the people or the group. And some had no problem working with others, and in other cases, they wouldn't work together. So we do have those ethnic subgroups that have worked together for the betterment of all. Marginality, the status of being between two cultures. And in some cases, neither culture wants anything to do with that individual, whereas other groups will take that person in with no problem. We'll have the stratification of class and gender. It's a structured ranking of entire groups of people. It perpetrates unequal rewards and power in a society. And class or social ranking are based on wealth. Again, going back to that class system, you have low class, middle class, upper class. The elite are the wealthy. The middle are kind of in the middle somewhere. And then you have the people who are the poorest of the poor. There are theoretical perspectives, functionalist perspective, conflict theory, symbolic interactionist. Now, symbolic interactionist, when you go through your book, it doesn't really talk about symbolic interactionist. What does it talk about? It talks about labeling. It is cultural labeling. Okay, so we'll get more into that as we go. So what are racial benefits functions? Provides a moral justification for maintaining a society that routinely deprives one group of their rights and their privileges. It discourages the subordinate people from attempting to question their lowly status. It justifies existing practices and rallying points for social movements. Racist myths encourage support for existing order. Societal change. There's a majority would suffer even greater poverty. And relieve the dominant group of the responsibility to address the economic and educational problems faced by the subordinate group. They overlook them. The people who are in power, who are the dominant group, they're fine. They're not too worried about you because they're taking care of their own. Dysfunctions of racial beliefs and basically discrimination. It fails to use the resources of all individuals. Mainly because of skin color or ability. And I say ability because there are people with disabilities who can do amazing things, but they're looked down on because they have some type of a disability. It limits the search for talent and leadership to the dominant group. You have to find somebody within your group. It aggravates social problems such as poverty, delinquency, and crime, because people want to get better. They want to move ahead. And if you're stuck in a place, sometimes you have to resort to doing things that you don't want to do to be able to survive. It invests time and money to defend the barriers that prevent the full participation of all members. It undercuts goodwill and friendly diplomatic relations between nations. Social change is inhibited because change may assist a subordinate group, so we don't want to change. It promotes disrespect of law enforcement and for the peaceful settlement. We have conflict theory. It assumes social structure is based and understood in terms of conflict or tension between competing groups, us and them. The blaming of a victim shaming, portrays the problems of racial and ethnic minorities as their fault. It's their fault they're in that situation, even though you have a dominant group that is holding them back. It doesn't recognize the responsibility that the dominant group has to try to lift up those ethnic minorities. We have labeling theory, explains why certain people are viewed as deviant while others engage in the same behavior and are not. Okay, if we look at a young Black man who gets into trouble, we say that, oh, you know, he comes from a bad family. However, we may see a white child do the exact same thing, and it's like, well, you know, he just made a bad decision. Labeling. Stereotypes. It's the unreliable generalization about all members of a group that don't take individual differences into account. Um, we um, we don't see it so much now, but if we go back to the 30s, 40s, 50s, we would see depictions of people in comics where Chinese people had very squinty eyes and they looked a very certain way. And Black people, you saw them with very stereotypical features. We look at those groups as not necessarily being as good as another group. Self-fulfilling prophecy. If you are constantly being told that you are not good, you are a bad person, that you're never going to amount to anything, what happens? Chances are you're not going to amount to anything. The results of those false definitions become accurate. I remember hearing an interview with an actor, and I can't remember who the actor was, but he said he was always getting into trouble when he was in school. And his parents wanted him to go to college, and he knew that he had to take the ACT tests. And so he didn't study for him, but he took the ACT, and he got a letter that said that he had passed and he was in the upper percentage. Well, he thought, well, man, I'm not as dumb as I thought I was. So he went on to college. He did very, very well. He became a businessman, became an actor. He saved his money. He did very, very well. And then 25 years later, he gets a letter in the mail that said that the letter he had gotten 25 years earlier that said that he had been in the upper percentage was wrong, that he was actually in the lower percentage. But he had become an amazing businessman and a multimillionaire because he didn't think he was very good. He got this letter that said, hey, you're really smart. And so he started to live up to that expectation. Self-fulfilling prophecies can be good or they can be bad. We have migration, and migration is any transfer of population moving from one place to another place. Doesn't matter whether it's within the United States or in another country. Migration is a transfer of population. People move from rural to urban, or they move from urban to rural. Migration. Emigration by immigrants. It means leaving a country to settle in another country. You have people from Mexico that are immigrants when they leave their country. Then they are immigrants in the new country. So immigration and immigrants denotes coming into the new country. We have push factors. Discourages a person from remaining where he or she lives. We have a lot of people that are coming across southern borders because of war. We look at Venezuela and we look at Guatemala and these South American countries, Colombia. People are fleeing because there are drug wars. There are groups that are trying to kill other groups to take control. There are pull factors. It encourages the person to move to a new location. If a family member comes to the United States and they're doing very, very well, a lot of time they will be the anchor person, and then they will bring family to live with them. They have a reason to be there. The person that left their country, came there, they may be doing very, very well. And so they will bring their family members to be a part of that well living. We have globalization. It's the worldwide integration of government policies, cultures, social movements, and financial markets through trade and the exchange of ideas. We have become a globalized civilization. We trade worldwide. We get clothes and things that we use in our households every day from other countries. And we also export things to other countries that they use on a regular basis. Globalization can be a really great thing unless you have a pandemic. And we saw when we had the global pandemic a couple years ago with COVID-19, there were places that shut down. So you couldn't get medications that you needed. You couldn't get parts for cars or refrigerators or items like that because they were made in foreign countries that had been shut down and were no longer working. We had food supplies that had difficulties because businesses were shut down, and they weren't having the food supplies move the way that they usually have. Buildings couldn't be built because lumber that came from Canada couldn't come down because the borders were shut down. So globalization is great when things work the way they're supposed to, but when problems start to ensue, such as a global pandemic or a war, then it becomes much more difficult. So the subordinate groups, we have annexation, particularly during wars or as a result of war, incorporate or attached land. Dominant power generally suppresses the language and the culture of the minority. Last year, went to Ireland on a trip. And when the English invaded Ireland one of the many times, they stopped the Irish people from speaking their Gaelic language. They are just now in the last 25 years relearning their Gaelic language because their culture and their language was squashed. They weren't allowed to speak it. Colonialism, it maintains the political, social, economic, and cultural dominance over people by foreign power for an extended period of time. If you look at many countries, Great Britain and Spain were colonists. They were the colonialism. They invaded places and forced their culture. We saw that in Africa. We saw that in this country in the early days. The colonialism took over the native indigenous people and almost wiped them out. Spectrum or intergroup status, relationships between and among racial, ethnic, and religious groups, as well as other dominant subordinate relationships, and they're not changed. Relationships do change over time. As I said earlier, at one time, you were not allowed to have an interracial marriage. Now, nobody thinks twice about it. So the consequences: extermination. Genocide is a deliberate, systematic killing of an entire people or a nation. Most often we think about the Holocaust. It was state-sponsored systematic persecution and annihilation of European Jews by Nazi Germany and its collaborators. But they're not the only ones that have done it. We have seen it happen in this country. We all but wiped out the indigenous people. There are islands in the Caribbean that the indigenous people no longer exist because they were wiped out by the African slave trade. The indigenous people caught diseases that they were unable to fight off, and they all died. Ethnic cleansing refers to the forced deportation of people accompanied by systematic violence, including death. We see that in different countries where groups just go from town to town to town to town, and they kill all of the people within a village because they are doing that ethnic cleansing. We also see that with some of the Muslim groups because there are different factions of Muslim. And because one Muslim group doesn't believe the way another Muslim group does, they decide that they can wipe that other group out. We saw a lot of that back in the early 1990s with Saddam Hussein, who was a Muslim, but he was from one group and disliked the Turkish Muslims, so tried to wipe them out. We have expulsions. The dominant group may choose to force a specific subordinate group to leave certain areas or even to vacate a country. Secession. The group ceases to be subordinate when it secedes to form a new nation or moves to an already established nation where it becomes dominant. So we look at segregated metro America. Okay, these are places where there is a segregation between the Black and the white population, particularly. We look at Milwaukee and Waukesha and West Allis, Newark and Jersey City, Chicago, Naperville, and Elgin, Detroit, Warren, and Dearborn. Now, Dearborn is one of the largest Muslim populations in the United States. Cleveland and the Elyria area, Buffalo, Chicago, and Niagara Falls. St. Louis is very segregated. Los Angeles, Long Beach, and Anaheim. So we go through those areas. The Hispanic white segregation, LA, Long Beach, and Anaheim, Newark, and New Jersey, Providence, Rhode Island, Providence and Warwick, Boston, Cambridge, and Newton, and on and on. And then the Asian segregation between Asian and white, Edison, New Brunswick, New Jersey, New York and White Plains, Houston, Los Angeles and Long Beach, Boston. So segregation. Segregation is the physical separation of two groups in residence, workplace, and social functions. At one time, we had segregation in the United States. White people had their schools, their shops, their swimming pools. Black people had their stores, their housing areas, their places. And they weren't allowed to intermix. If they tried to intermix, and mostly it was, excuse me, it was Black people trying to integrate into the white population, they were usually treated with violence. Apartheid. It's a rigid government-imposed racial segregation that prevailed for so long in the Republic of South Africa. Finally, there were a lot of performers that refused to go to South Africa to perform because they did not like the way that the African native people were being treated. We have resegregation, physical separation of racial and ethnic groups reappearing after a period of relative integration, where people have finally integrated together, everything is good, and then we start to separate them out again. And we have fusion. It occurs when a minority or a majority group combine to form a new group. Assimilation. Subordinate individual or group takes on the characteristics of the dominant group, and eventually they are accepted into that group. Segmented assimilation, outcome of immigrants and their descendants, moving into different classes of the host society. The pluralist perspective, it implies that various groups in a society have mutual respect for one another's culture. It allows minorities to express their own culture without suffering prejudice or discrimination. So we have bilingual adult education, and we have it in different places where people who don't speak any English learn to speak English. And it happens in foreign countries also, where people who don't speak the language are taught the language so that they fit in a little bit better. You have to be able to speak English to become an American citizen now. So we have that. We have resistance to change, resistance by subordinate groups. They don't want to promote change that's going to bring them more rights or privileges. They want to be themselves. But they're not treated with true equality if they don't try to fit in more. Afrocentric perspective, it emphasizes the custom of African cultures. We have had a lot of resurgence of African culture. We have Black people who are looking back at their ancestry, and they're starting to dress in the clothes that their ancestors would have worn many, many years ago. They've pervaded the history, culture, and behavior of Blacks in the United States. We have Eurocentrism, works toward a multiculturalist or pluralistic orientation with no viewpoint that is suppressed. So everybody is welcome. Everybody's ideas are welcome. In recent years, we've seen Black Lives Matter. And one of the things was where that came from was the frustration. And if we go back to Martin Luther King, he even said people will riot because they feel no one is hearing them when they are speaking. And that's where Black Lives Matter came from, is Black people were dying. They were being killed by police officers, or they were killing each other, and everybody was looking the other way. So they came up with the Black Lives Matter. Now, it had some good things that went along with it because um, it did, police officers got additional training. And in some cases, they took leaders from Black Lives Matter and had them ride with police officers and have them see the things that they have to deal with on a daily basis. Unfortunately, they had leaders who took in money and then abandoned the people that had sent them the money, that had been the ones who were on the ground, who were the ones who had family members who had suffered at the hands of others. Um, so, there's that part of it also. So we have intersectionality, refers to the overlapping independent system of advantage and disadvantage that positions people in society on a basis of race, class, gender, and other characteristics. Critiques argue that intersectionality is all about people who are obsessed with identity politics and who form alliances based on allegedly shared social groupings. Society can't afford to let up on the effort to eradicate sexism, racism, and other forces that create social inequality. And we still see those points still going on even today. And that's going to conclude chapter 1. So I ask you to go back, look at your syllabus. You will have your first paper due, Who Am I, in September. I believe it was the 9th. So start to think about that. Think about who you are, where you come from, and what your family celebrates. So I hope that you all have a great start of your school year. And as I said, if you have questions, please email me. Thanks a lot, and I will talk to you soon.